The woman in the designer coat pointed her manicured finger at Maya's loyal companion, her voice cutting through the coffee shop like a blade. "That filthy mutt doesn't belong here. I'm calling animal control." But as the badge gleamed from beneath the dog's vest and Maya's trembling hands revealed the truth, Karen's face went white. She had no idea what storm she'd just unleashed, or that her own dark secret was about to surface in the morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestones of downtown Millbrook as Maya Chen adjusted her grip on her coffee cup, her fingers trembling slightly. The familiar weight of Atlas pressed against her left leg, a 60-pound German shepherd whose amber eyes constantly scanned their surroundings with professional precision. To most people, he looked like any other well-behaved dog. They couldn't see the invisible tether that connected him to Maya's very survival. "Just breathe," Maya whispered to herself, the same mantra she'd repeated countless times since the accident 18 months ago. The crowded sidewalk ahead made her chest tighten, but Atlas's steady presence anchored her to the moment. His training had cost more than her car, but he was worth every penny and every bureaucratic battle she'd fought to get him certified. The Grind Coffee House buzzed with its usual Tuesday morning energy. Maya had chosen this place specifically for its corner table, positioned with a clear view of all exits. Atlas guided her through the maze of chairs and laptops, his movements so fluid that most patrons barely noticed them. This was their routine: coffee, a quiet corner, and 30 minutes of relative peace before Maya had to face the outside world. She just settled into her seat when the voice cut through the ambient chatter like nails on a chalkboard. "Excuse me, but dogs aren't allowed in here." Maya looked up to see a woman in her 50s standing beside their table, her blonde hair pulled back in a severe bun that seemed to stretch her face taut. She wore a cream-colored Burberry coat that probably cost more than Maya's monthly rent, and her perfectly manicured nails were already reaching for her phone. "I'm sorry." Maya's voice came out smaller than she intended. Atlas shifted subtly, positioning himself between Maya and the woman, a movement so slight that only someone trained to notice would catch it. "The dog," the woman continued, her voice rising to ensure nearby tables could hear. "This is a food establishment. Health codes, you know. Very unsanitary." She gestured dismissively at Atlas, who sat perfectly still, his vest clearly visible against his dark fur. Maya's heart began to race, that familiar flutter that Atlas was trained to detect. She felt his nose gently press against her hand, a grounding technique they'd practiced hundreds of times. "He's a service dog," she said, forcing herself to meet the woman's hostile gaze. "He's legally allowed to be here." The woman's laugh was sharp and bitter. "Oh, please. I've seen this scam before. You bought some vest online and think you can take your pet anywhere. I know the manager here." She turned toward the counter, raising her voice. "Excuse me. We have a situation." Heat flooded Maya's cheeks as conversations around them began to die down. She could feel the weight of curious stares, the whispered conversations starting at nearby tables. This was exactly the kind of attention she'd been trying to avoid since moving to Millbrook. Please," Maya said, her voice steadier now. "I have all the proper documentation. Atlas is a certified psychiatric service dog. He's trained to psychiatric." The woman's eyes lit up with cruel interest. "So you're crazy. That explains it." She pulled out her phone with theatrical flourish. "I'm calling animal control. And the police. This is fraud, and I won't stand for it." The coffee shop had gone almost silent now, every conversation suspended as patrons turned to watch the unfolding drama. Maya felt Atlas's training kick in. As he applied gentle pressure against her leg, his warm weight a reminder that she wasn't alone. "You can't do that," Maya said, her voice gaining strength. "Under the Americans with Disabilities Act, don't lecture me about the law, sweetheart." The woman's smile was predatory. "I'm Karen Whitmore. My husband is Judge Whitmore. I think I know a thing or two about what's legal and what isn't." Maya felt the familiar tightness in her chest, the precursor to a panic attack that had once left her collapsed on a grocery store floor. But Atlas was already moving, his nose finding the pressure point on her thigh that helped regulate her breathing. The touch was so subtle that Karen missed it entirely, but Maya felt her heart rate begin to slow. Mrs. Whitmore, the coffee shop manager, appeared at their table, wringing his hands nervously. Perhaps we could discuss this. There's nothing to discuss, David. Karen's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to getting her way. Either remove this animal, or I'm calling the health department. Your choice. Maya watched the manager's face crumple with indecision. She'd seen this before, the moment when people had to choose between doing what was right and avoiding conflict. In her experience, conflict avoidance usually won. I'm sorry, David said, not meeting Maya's eyes. But maybe you could. No. Maya's voice cut through his stumbling apology. She stood slowly, Atlas rising with her in perfect synchronization. I'm not going anywhere. Karen's eyes narrowed to slits. Oh, you're not? We'll see about that. She held her phone up, already dialing. Yes, I need animal control at the Grind Coffee House immediately. There's a woman here with an aggressive dog, refusing to leave. Yes, I said aggressive, it's showing signs of hostility. Maya's mouth fell open. He hasn't done anything. He's been sitting perfectly still. Are you calling me a liar? Karen's voice reached a pitch that made several customers wince. This animal is clearly agitated. Look at those eyes, predatory. Dangerous. She gestured dramatically at Atlas, who sat with the patient dignity of a dog who'd endured far worse than hostile strangers. That's enough. A new voice joined the conversation, a young woman with short black hair and a barista apron. I saw the whole thing. That dog hasn't moved an inch. Karen whirled on the employee. And you are someone who actually knows the law. The barista's name tag read, Sam, service dogs are protected under federal law. You can't just kick them out because you don't like dogs. I don't have to justify myself to some minimum wage, Karen. The voice that interrupted was male, deep, and carried an unmistakable note of authority. A man in his 30s had appeared beside their table, his police uniform pristine despite the early hour. What's going on here? Maya felt her heart sink. Of course Karen would know the local police. Small towns were like that, everyone knew everyone, and influence flowed along predictable channels. Officer Morrison, thank goodness. Karen's entire demeanor shifted, becoming suddenly fragile and victimized. This woman is causing a disturbance with her animal. I simply asked her to follow health regulations and she became combative. Maya opened her mouth to protest, but Officer Morrison held up a hand. Let me see some identification, he said to Maya. And documentation for the dog. This was it, the moment Maya had been dreading since she'd moved to Millbrook. She reached into her purse with shaking hands, pulling out her driver's license and a leather folder containing Atlas's certification papers. The documents were pristine, laminated, and bore the official seals of both the training facility and the state certification board. Officer Morrison examined the papers with professional thoroughness, his expression unreadable. Around them, the coffee shop had become a theater, with every customer leaning forward to catch the drama's resolution. These appear to be in order, he said finally, handing the documents back to Maya. This is a legitimate service animal. He has every right to be here. Karen's face went through a series of expressions, surprise, anger, and something that might have been embarrassment. That's impossible. I know a fake when I see one. The documentation is clear, Officer Morrison said firmly. Service dogs are working animals, not pets. They are trained to perform specific tasks for people with disabilities. He looked at Maya with what might have been sympathy. You're not required to disclose your disability, but you do have the right to be here. Maya felt a surge of gratitude. So strong it nearly brought tears to her eyes. Thank you, she managed. But Karen wasn't finished. This is ridiculous. Just because someone has papers doesn't mean, she stopped mid-sentence, her eyes widening as she focused on something behind Maya. Maya turned to see what had caught Karen's attention and felt her blood turn to ice. Through the coffee shop's front window, she could see a news van pulling up to the curb. The Channel 7 logo was clearly visible on its side. What? Maya began, but Karen was already moving toward the door, her phone pressed to her ear. Yes. This is Karen Whitmore. I called about the story. Yes, the fake service dog situation. Perfect timing. Maya watched in horror as a reporter and cameraman climbed out of the van, already setting up their equipment. This was about to become a very public spectacle and she was trapped in the middle of it. I didn't call them, Officer Morrison said. Quietly, his jaw tight with anger. This wasn't supposed to, it's too late, Maya whispered, watching Karen gesture animatedly toward the coffee shop window. She's going to destroy me on live television. Atlas pressed closer to her leg, sensing her distress. But even his calming equals reporter Jessica Martinez had been covering human interest stories for Channel 7 for 3 years and she'd learned to spot manufactured drama from a mile away. The blonde woman in the expensive coat was performing, every gesture calculated, every word rehearsed. But it was the young woman with the German Shepherd who caught Jessica's attention. The way she held herself, the careful positioning, the dog's professional demeanor, this wasn't some pet owner trying to scan the system. Rolling in 30 seconds, her cameraman, Tony, called out. Karen smoothed her hair one final time and positioned herself at the perfect angle to catch both the coffee shop and the morning light. Remember, I'm the victim here, she said to Jessica, loud enough for the gathering crowd to hear. I was just trying to protect public health when this woman became aggressive. Through the coffee shop window, Jessica could see the actual scene, the young woman sitting quietly while her dog remained perfectly still at her feet. A uniformed officer stood nearby, his expression clearly troubled. This wasn't adding up. Mrs. Whitmore, Jessica said carefully, can you tell me exactly what happened? Karen's smile was camera-ready. I was enjoying my morning coffee when this woman brought what she claims is a service dog into the establishment. When I politely pointed out that dogs aren't allowed in restaurants, she became hostile and refused to leave. And you believe the dog isn't a legitimate service animal? I know a fake when I see one. Karen's voice carried absolute certainty. These people buy vests online and think they can take their pets anywhere. It's fraud, plain and simple, and it's an insult to people with real disabilities. Jessica glanced at her cameraman, who gave her a subtle nod. They were recording, but something felt off about this whole situation. Mrs. Whitmore, I understand your husband is Judge Whitmore. Karen's chest puffed with pride. That's right. Judge Robert Whitmore of the Superior Court. We've been pillars of this community for 15 years. And in your professional opinion, my professional opinion. Karen laughed, the sound sharp against the morning air. I'm not some minimum wage barista. I have a master's degree in social work from Columbia. I know manipulation when I see it. Inside the coffee shop, Maya watched the interview through the window with growing dread. She could hear Karen's voice through the glass, each word another nail in the coffin of her anonymity. Atlas remained pressed against her leg, his training keeping him calm despite the chaos around them. This is getting out of hand, Officer Morrison muttered, his radio crackling with calls from dispatch. I should shut this down. Can you? Maya asked hopefully. Morrison's expression was grim. Not without making it worse. She's got a right to talk to the press, and if I intervene now, it'll look like I'm suppressing her story. Outside, Jessica was asking follow-up questions, but something in Karen's responses was triggering her reporter's instincts. The woman was too polished, too prepared, like she'd been planning this moment. Mrs. Whitmore, how did you know to call Channel 7 so quickly? Karen's smile faltered for just a moment. I believe in civic responsibility. When I see fraud, I report it. But you called us before you called animal control. Our phone logs show your call came in at 7:23 a.m. Animal control didn't receive their call until 7:31. The pause stretched too long. Karen's media training, if she had any, was failing her. I wanted to make sure the public was aware of this growing problem. Jessica's journalistic instincts were screaming now. She'd covered enough stories to know when someone was hiding something. And you're certain this is fraud? Absolutely. Look at that dog, it's just sitting there like any pet would. Real service dogs are constantly working, constantly alert. Jessica glanced through the window again. The German Shepherd wasn't just sitting, he was positioned with military precision, his eyes scanning the environment while maintaining contact with his handler. His vest bore multiple patches and what looked like official certification tags. Mrs. Whitmore, can you describe what specific training a service dog should have? Karen's confidence wavered. Well, they are trained to help people. Guide dogs for the blind, obviously. But this woman clearly isn't blind. What about other types of service dogs? There are no other types. Karen's voice was becoming defensive. It's guide dogs or nothing. These psychiatric service dogs are just made-up nonsense for people who want to bring their pets everywhere. Jessica felt the story shifting beneath her feet. This wasn't the fraud exposure Karen had promised, this was something much more interesting. Mrs. Whitmore, psychiatric service dogs are recognized under federal law. They are trained to perform specific tasks for people with PTSD, anxiety disorders, and other mental health conditions. That's ridiculous. Karen's composure was cracking. Next, you'll tell me emotional support peacocks are real service animals. There's actually a significant difference between emotional support animals and psychiatric service dogs, Jessica said gently. Service dogs undergo extensive training to perform specific tasks. Emotional support animals require no training and aren't protected under the same laws. Karen's face was flushing red. I don't care about technicalities. I know what I saw, a woman trying to scam the system, and I won't stand for it. At that moment, the coffee shop door opened and Officer Morrison stepped outside, his expression carefully neutral. Mrs. Whitmore, I've examined the documentation. The dog is legitimately certified. That's impossible, Karen snapped. Those papers can be faked. Morrison held up his phone. I called the certification agency. Atlas is registered under Maya Chen, certified for psychiatric service work. The documentation is authentic. Jessica watched Karen's face cycle through emotions, anger, disbelief, and something that looked like panic. Well, even if the papers are real, that doesn't mean, Mom. The voice came from behind them, young and uncertain. Jessica turned to see a teenage girl with Karen's blonde hair but none of her polished confidence. The girl looked mortified. As she took in the scene, the news camera, the gathering crowd, her mother's defensive posture. Chloe. Karen's voice was sharp with warning. I told you to wait in the car. But Mom, isn't that the lady from Dr. Peterson's office? The one. Who? Go back to the car. Now. But Chloe was already looking at Maya through the window, recognition dawning in her eyes. Mom, she's not faking. She has panic attacks. I saw her at the therapy office last month when you made me. Chloe, stop talking. Right now. Jessica's reporter instincts kicked into overdrive. Mrs. Whitmore, are you also a patient at Dr. Peterson's practice? Karen's face went white. That's private medical information. But if you're both patients of the same psychiatrist, then you'd know that psychiatric service dogs are legitimate medical equipment. I don't know what you're implying. I'm not implying anything. I'm asking directly, are you receiving psychiatric treatment? Karen looked around. Desperately, as if seeking an escape route. The crowd had grown larger, drawn by the commotion. Several people had their phones out, recording. This was no longer just a news story, it was becoming a social media event. That has nothing to do with Mom takes pills, Chloe said quietly. But her voice carried in the morning air. Lots of pills. She has them delivered so no one at the pharmacy sees, Chloe. Karen's voice cracked like a whip. Get in the car this instant. But the damage was done. Jessica could see the story reshaping itself in real time. This wasn't about service dog fraud, this was about projection, about someone attacking another person for the very thing they were hiding about themselves. Mrs. Whitmore, Jessica said carefully, if you're receiving treatment for mental health issues, wouldn't you understand why someone might need a psychiatric service dog? Karen's carefully constructed facade was collapsing. I don't have mental health issues. I have a stress from dealing with people like her. She pointed an accusing finger at Maya. People who abuse the system. But taking medication for anxiety is mental health treatment, Jessica pressed. And if you're seeing Dr. Peterson, who specializes in trauma therapy, stop. Karen's voice was barely above a whisper. Stop recording. Mrs. Whitmore, you called us here. You wanted to tell this story. Not this story, Karen said, her composure completely shattered. This was supposed to be about her, not me. Jessica felt the familiar thrill of a story breaking open. What was this supposed to be about? Karen looked around at the crowd, at the cameras, at her daughter's horrified face. For the first time since Jessica had met her, Karen Whitmore looked genuinely vulnerable. Karen's voice was small now, nothing like the authoritative tone she'd used moments before. I just wanted people to see that she's not special. That she's not the only one who's struggling. The confession hung in the air like a thunderclap. Jessica realized she was witnessing something raw and real, a moment of human truth that rarely made it onto television. Mrs. Whitmore, Jessica said softly, are you saying you're struggling too? Karen's eyes filled with tears, her perfect makeup beginning to run. You don't understand. I can't be seen as weak. My husband's career, my reputation, if people knew I was seeing a psychiatrist, if they knew about the medication, about the panic attacks. Mom, Chloe said, reaching for her mother's hand. It's okay. Nobody cares about that stuff. They do care, Karen Weiss. The morning air hit Maya's face like a slap of reality as she stepped outside the coffee shop. Every instinct screamed at her to turn around, to retreat to the safety of her corner table and wait for this nightmare to end. But something in Karen's broken posture, in the way her daughter was trying to comfort her, made Maya's feet keep moving forward. Atlas maintained perfect heel position, his training overriding the chaos around them. Maya could feel his subtle tension, not anxiety, but heightened awareness. He was reading the crowd, cataloging potential threats, ready to intervene if her stress level spiked. But for the first time in months, Maya felt oddly calm. Maya, don't, Officer Morrison started, but she was already approaching the news crew. The crowd fell silent as she walked into the circle of cameras and curious onlookers. Karen looked up through her tears, her face cycling through confusion, fear, and something that might have been hope. I'm Maya Chen, she said, her voice carrying clearly in the morning air. And this is Atlas. Jessica Martinez lowered her microphone, uncertain how to handle this development. In her experience, victims of public attacks usually fled, not walked toward their attackers. Maya, Jessica said carefully, do you want to respond to Mrs. Whitmore's accusations? Maya looked at Karen, who was still crying silently while her daughter held her hand. The powerful woman who had seemed so threatening minutes before now looked fragile, human, broken. I think, Maya said slowly, that Mrs. Whitmore is scared. And I understand being scared. Karen's head snapped up. What? You're scared that people will judge you for needing help. Scared that they'll see you as weak or broken or less than perfect. Maya's voice was gentle but carried clearly to the growing crowd. I get it. Because I was scared too. I'm not, Karen started, but her voice cracked. You are, Maya said, not unkindly. And that's okay. Being scared doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. Jessica watched this unexpected turn with professional fascination. This wasn't the confrontation anyone had expected. Maya was diffusing the situation with compassion instead of escalating it with righteous anger. Mrs. Whitmore, Maya continued, you said you have a master's degree in social work. That means you went into a profession to help people. You understand trauma, you understand mental health. You know that psychiatric service dogs are real and necessary. Karen nodded miserably. I do know. I've always known. Then why? Because I can't have one. The words exploded from Karen with startling vehemence. Do you understand? I can't be seen needing one. My husband's career, my position in this community, if people knew I was so damaged that I needed a psychiatric service dog, it would destroy everything we've built. The confession hung in the air like a live wire. Maya felt Atlas shift slightly, responding to the emotional intensity radiating from both women. So when you saw me, Maya said, understanding dawning in her voice, you saw everything you wanted but couldn't have. You made it look so easy, Karen whispered. Sitting there with your dog, so calm, so put together. Like having a service. Dog was just a normal. And I was jealous. God help me, I was jealous of someone with PTSD because at least you get to have help. The crowd was completely silent now, even the phones lowered as people absorbed the raw humanity of the moment. Jessica made a subtle gesture to Tony to keep recording, but to do it discreetly. This wasn't entertainment anymore, it was something sacred. What happened to you? Maya asked quietly. Karen's composure cracked completely. Car accident. 3 years ago. I was driving, it was raining, and a truck ran a red light. The impact. She shuddered. I can still hear the sound of the metal crushing. I can still smell the gasoline. I wake up screaming some nights. Chloe squeezed her mother's hand. Mom, you don't have to. Yes, I do. Karen's voice was stronger now, as if confession was giving her strength. I've been taking medication, seeing Dr. Peterson twice a week. But I can't let anyone know. Robert's up for appointment to the appellate court. If they find out his wife is seeing a psychiatrist, if they think I'm unstable. So you attack other people for having what you need, Maya said, not accusingly. But with understanding. I didn't mean to attack you specifically. I just... Karen looked around at the crowd, at the cameras, at the mess she'd made. I saw you with Atlas and I thought, she gets to have help, and I have to suffer alone. It wasn't fair. Maya was quiet for a long moment. Atlas pressed against her leg, a gentle reminder of his presence. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried to every person in the circle. I got Atlas after I tried to kill myself. The words dropped like stones into still water. Jessica felt her breath catch. This was beyond anything she'd expected to cover this morning. I was a social worker too, Maya continued. I worked with trauma victims, helped them navigate the system, find resources. I thought I was strong, thought I could handle anything. Then I was assaulted by a client. Beaten so badly I was in the hospital for 2 weeks. Karen's face went pale. Oh God. The physical injuries healed, Maya said, her voice steady despite the tears now streaming down her face. But the psychological damage. I couldn't leave my apartment. Couldn't sleep. Couldn't trust anyone. I lost my job, my savings, my sense of safety. And one night, I decided I couldn't live like that anymore. The crowd had become a congregation, witnesses to a confession that none of them had expected to hear. Maya's vulnerability was so raw, so honest, that it transformed the morning gossip into something profound. What stopped you? Jessica asked. Gently. Maya's hand moved to Atlas's head, stroking his ears. My therapist suggested a psychiatric service dog. I said no, I wasn't that kind of person. I wasn't disabled. I just needed to be stronger, to try harder. But she kept pushing. And finally I agreed to meet with a trainer. And that's when you got Atlas. Not immediately. The application process took months. Background checks, medical evaluations, psychological assessments. Then came the training, not just for Atlas, but for me. Learning to work with him, to trust him, to accept help. Maya's voice grew stronger. It saved my life. Not just because he performed specific tasks, but because he gave me back my independence. Karen was crying openly now. I didn't know. I'm so sorry, I didn't know. How could you know? Maya asked. That's the point. You can't tell by looking at someone what they are carrying, what they've survived, what they need to function. You just saw a woman with a dog and decided she was weak. Like people would see me, Karen whispered. Like people would see you, Maya agreed. But Mrs. Whitmore, you're a social worker. You know the statistics. You know how many people struggle with mental health issues, how many people need help. It's different when it's you, Karen said miserably. No, Maya said firmly. It's exactly the same. The only difference is stigma. The shame that makes us hide our struggles instead of seeking help. Jessica realized she was witnessing something extraordinary, not just a new story, but a moment of genuine human connection. Two women, both wounded, both struggling, finding common ground in their shared pain. "Mrs. Whitmore," Maya said, "if you were my client, what would you tell me to do?" Karen looked up, confusion clouding her features. "Your client? If I came to you as a social worker and said I was struggling with PTSD, having panic attacks, unable to function normally, what would you tell me?" "I'd tell you to get help," Karen said immediately. "I'd tell you that mental health is just as important as physical health, that there's no shame in needing support. And if I said I was worried about what people would think, I'd tell you that your health is more important than other people's opinions. That the people who truly matter will support you." Maya smiled, the first genuine smile she'd worn all morning. "Then maybe you should take your own advice." Karen stared at her for a long moment, then looked around at the crowd. Instead of the judgment she'd feared, she saw faces filled with understanding, with compassion. People were nodding, some wiping away tears. "I can't," Karen whispered. "You don't understand the pressure, the expectations." "I understand more than you think," Maya said. "But Mrs. Whitmore, you called the news here to expose what you thought was fraud. Instead, you've exposed something much more important, the stigma that keeps people suffering in silence." Jessica stepped forward, her reporter's instincts recognizing a pivotal moment. "Mrs. Whitmore, what would you like to say to other people who might be struggling with similar issues?" Karen looked at Maya, at Atlas, at her daughter still holding her hand. When she spoke, her voice was shaky but determined. "I want to say that I'm sorry. Not just to Maya, but to everyone who's ever been made to feel ashamed for needing help. I let my own fear and shame make me cruel to someone who was just trying to live her life." She paused, gathering courage. "And I want to say that if you're struggling, if you're in pain, if you need help, get it. Don't let pride or fear or other people's expectations keep you suffering alone." The crowd began to applaud, a sound that started small but grew until it filled the morning air. Maya felt Atlas lean against her leg, his way of sharing the moment. But as the applause died down, Maya saw something in Karen's eyes that made her heart sink. The woman had made a public confession, yes, but Maya could see the regret already creeping in. The reality of what this would mean for her who. The crowd's energy shifted like a tide reversing direction. The compassion that had filled the morning air moments before was suddenly replaced by confusion and growing anger. Maya watched in horror as Karen transformed back into the predator. She'd been when this all started, but now armed with Maya's most private trauma. In fact, Karen continued, her voice gaining strength with each word, "I think this proves my point perfectly. We've all been manipulated by a very skilled performance." Jessica Martinez felt whiplash from the sudden change in tone. "Mrs. Whitmore, I'm not sure I understand, don't you see?" Karen's smile was sharp as a blade. "This young woman just demonstrated exactly the kind of emotional manipulation that makes these cases so difficult to assess. She got us all feeling sorry for her, sharing her tragic story, making us forget that she still hasn't proven she actually needs a service dog." Maya's blood turned to ice. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that having trauma doesn't automatically qualify someone for a service dog. There are standards, requirements, specific disabilities that qualify." Karen's voice was clinical now. "Professional. And I'm saying that someone who can give such a composed, articulate speech about their mental health issues clearly isn't as disabled as they claim to be." The crowd was murmuring now, some nodding along with Karen's logic. Maya felt Atlas press against her leg, responding to her rapidly climbing stress levels. "Mrs. Whitmore," Officer Morrison stepped forward, "we've already established that the dog is legitimately certified. Certification can be faked," Karen interrupted. "Papers can be forged. And now that I've had time to really observe this animal, I have serious doubts about its training." "What doubts?" Jessica asked, though she looked uncomfortable with the direction the story was taking. Karen pointed at Atlas, who remained in perfect heel position beside Maya. "Look at how still it is. Real service dogs are constantly working, constantly alert. This dog is too calm, too well-behaved. It's clearly just a well-trained pet. Maya's voice was barely a whisper. He is working. He's monitoring my stress levels, providing deep pressure therapy, scanning for potential threats. Convenient, Karen said with a laugh that cut like glass. All invisible tasks that can't be verified. How do we know you're not just making that up? Because I'm not. Prove it. Karen's voice was a challenge. If this dog is really trained for psychiatric work, then demonstrate it. Show us these miraculous abilities. Maya felt her chest tightening, the familiar precursor to a panic attack. The crowd was watching her with renewed suspicion, their brief moment of sympathy evaporating under Karen's calculated assault. I don't have to prove anything to you, Maya said, but her voice lacked conviction. Actually, you do, Karen said, pulling out her phone again. Because I've been thinking about this, and I remember now, there was a news story last month about a woman who was arrested for using a fake service dog. She had official-looking papers too. Maya's world tilted. That's not, in fact. Karen continued, scrolling through her phone. I think I remember the details now. Woman in her late 20s, dark hair, claimed to have PTSD. Used a German Shepherd she'd trained herself and passed off as a service dog. The crowd's murmur grew louder. Maya felt Atlas shift slightly, his nose touching her hand, a reminder. To breathe, to stay grounded. But the panic was building faster than his training could combat. That wasn't me, Maya said desperately. I've never been arrested. I've never done anything like that. Really? Karen's smile was predatory. Then you won't mind if I call the police department in your previous city to verify your story? Maya's face went white. There was something in Karen's tone, a confidence that suggested she knew more than she was letting on. What previous city? Officer Morrison asked. Portland, Karen said without hesitation. That's where you're from, isn't it, Maya? Portland, Oregon. We worked as a social worker until you were, what was it? Fired for inappropriate conduct with a client. Maya's legs nearly gave out. How do you? I made some calls while you were giving your touching speech, Karen said, her voice filled with false sympathy. You see, when someone accuses me of fraud, I like to make sure they are not projecting their own criminal behavior onto me. The crowd was turning now, their faces shifting from compassion to suspicion to anger. Maya could hear whispers starting, fraud, liar, scam artist. That's not what happened, Maya said, but her voice was weak, barely audible over the growing noise of the crowd. No. Karen's eyebrows rose theatrically. Then what did happen, Maya? Why don't you tell us the real story about your last job? Maya felt the world spinning around her. Atlas was pressing against her leg now, using his full body weight to provide grounding pressure, but even his training couldn't stop the avalanche of panic that was building. Oh. Maya's voice cracked. I was attacked. A client attacked me. A client you were having an inappropriate relationship with, Karen said. Her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd done her homework. A client who filed a complaint saying you'd crossed professional boundaries. No. Maya's voice was stronger now, desperate. That's not true. He attacked me because I refused his advances. I was the victim. According to the police report. Karen continued relentlessly, you were found in a compromising position with a client after hours. The attack allegation was investigated and found to be unsubstantiated. Maya felt like she was drowning. They didn't investigate properly. They didn't believe me because you were caught in a lie, Karen finished. And now you're here, in my community, with your fake service dog and your sob story, looking for new victims to manipulate. The crowd was getting uglier now. Someone shouted, fraud. Another voice called out, get her out of here. Maya looked around desperately, seeing faces that had been sympathetic just minutes before now twisted with anger and disgust. This was her worst nightmare, being publicly exposed, having her trauma weaponized against her. Mrs. Whitmore, Jessica Martinez stepped forward, her journalistic instincts finally kicking in. Do you have documentation of these allegations? I have enough, Karen said smugly. I have the name of the police department, the case number, the social services agency that fired her. I'm sure Officer Morrison can verify the details. Maya watched Morrison's face as he processed this information. She could see the doubt creeping in, the professional skepticism that came with years of police work. Her legitimate documentation suddenly seemed less convincing in the face of Karen's accusations. This is insane, Maya whispered. You're destroying my life over a cup of coffee. I'm protecting my community, Karen said. From people who exploit the system and make it harder for people with real disabilities to get help. You mean people like you? Maya's voice was suddenly clear, cutting through the noise of the crowd. People who need help but are too proud to get it. Karen's confident mask slipped for just a moment. You're not doing this to protect anyone, Maya said, her voice growing stronger. You're doing this because you can't stand that I have something you want. You can't stand that I got help when you're too afraid to get it yourself. I am not afraid, Karen snapped. I am being responsible. I am maintaining the dignity of you are being a coward, Maya said, and the words hung in the air like a physical blow. The crowd fell silent. Karen's face went through a series of expressions, shock, rage, and something that might have been recognition. How dare you, Karen whispered. How dare I what? Tell the truth. Maya's voice was steady now, Atlas's presence grounding her even as her world crumbled around her. You attacked me because you're jealous. You're jealous that I have a service dog, jealous that I got help, jealous that I'm not hiding my struggles behind a fake smile and a designer coat. I said shut up, Karen's voice was dangerous now. You want to know what really happened in Portland? Maya continued, her voice carrying clearly to everyone present. I was assaulted by a client who thought I owed him sexual favors because I was being kind to him. When I refused, he attacked me. And then, because I couldn't prove it happened the way I said it did, because there were no witnesses, because he was believed over me, I was made to look like the perpetrator. The crowd was listening now, the anger in their faces shifting to something else. I lost my job, my reputation, my sense of safety. I moved here to start over, to rebuild my life. And you want to destroy that because you can't face your own demons. Karen's composure was cracking again. That's not. You don't understand the pressure. I understand perfectly, Maya said. But here's the difference between us, Mrs. Whitmore. I got help. I admitted I needed support and I got it. You're too proud, too scared, too worried about what people will think to take care of yourself. Stop, Karen said, but her voice was weak now. And because you won't get help, because you won't admit you need it, you're taking it out on someone who did. You're trying to destroy me because I represent everything you're afraid to face about yourself. Maya took a step forward, Atlas moving with her. But I'm not going to let you do it. I'm not going to let your fear and shame destroy my life. Karen stared at her, tears streaming down her face. You don't understand. If people know, if they find out about the medication, the therapy, the panic attacks, Robert's career will be over. EV. The words fell into the morning air like stones into glass, shattering everything Karen had built her defense upon. She turned to stare at her daughter, her face cycling through disbelief, horror, and a grief so profound it was painful to witness. What did you say? Karen's voice was barely a whisper. Chloe looked at her mother with the patience of someone who had been carrying this secret for far too long. Dad knows about the medication. He knows about Dr. Peterson. He's known for months. The crowd had gone completely silent. Even the traffic seemed to pause as everyone absorbed the magnitude of this revelation. Jessica Martinez made a subtle gesture to her cameraman. This was no longer a news story about service dog fraud. This was human drama of the highest order. That's impossible, Karen said, but her voice lacked conviction. I've been so careful. The pharmacy deliveries, the appointments during his court hours, Mom, he pays the insurance bills, Chloe said gently. He sees the claims. Dr. Peterson, the pharmacy, even the lab work for medication monitoring. He's seen it all. Karen's legs gave out. She sank onto the coffee shop's outdoor bench, her designer coat suddenly looking like costume pieces from a play that had ended. Why didn't he say anything? Because he was waiting for you to tell him, Chloe said, tears streaming down her face. He thought you'd trust him enough to share it. He's been worried sick about you, but he didn't want to invade your privacy. Maya watched this family drama unfold with a mixture of empathy and growing understanding. Atlas remained pressed against her leg, his training keeping him focused on her despite the emotional chaos surrounding them. He knows, Karen repeated, as if trying to make the words real. He's always known. And Mom, Chloe continued, her voice stronger now, he doesn't care about his appointment to the appellate court. Not if it means you have to suffer in silence. He told me he'd rather stay exactly where he is than watch you destroy yourself trying to be perfect. Karen's carefully constructed world was collapsing in real time. Every assumption, every fear, every justification for her behavior was crumbling. She looked up at Maya with eyes that held a new kind of terror, the terror of someone who realized they'd committed an unforgivable act for absolutely no reason. Oh. Karen started, then stopped. There were no words for the magnitude of what she'd done. Officer Morrison stepped forward, his expression troubled. Mrs. Whitmore, I need to ask, did you manufacture evidence against Ms. Chen? Karen's silence was answer enough. The phone calls you claimed to make to Portland, Morrison continued, the case numbers, the allegations, were they real? Oh. Karen's voice cracked. I found an article online about service dog fraud. Different woman, different city. I needed something to make her look guilty. The crowd's murmur turned ugly again, but this time the anger was directed at Karen. Someone shouted, she made it all up. Another voice called out, she slandered her. Maya felt no satisfaction in Karen's humiliation. Instead, she felt a profound sadness for what desperation and shame could drive a person to do. Mrs. Whitmore, Jessica Martinez said carefully. Are you saying you falsely accused Ms. Chen of criminal conduct? Karen nodded miserably. I was so angry, so jealous. When she stood up to me, when she shared her story, I couldn't stand that everyone was sympathizing with her instead of me. So I made up the story about Portland to turn everyone against her. That's defamation, Officer Morrison said grimly. Potentially criminal defamation. Maya stepped forward, Atlas moving with her. Officer Morrison, I don't want to press charges. Everyone turned to stare at her. Karen looked up with something approaching hope in her eyes. Maya, Morrison said, she tried to destroy your reputation. She made false accusations, she's sick, Maya said simply. She's scared and hurting and she lashed out. I understand that. But she could have ruined your life, Jessica said. The accusations about Portland, the service dog fraud, if people had believed her, but they didn't, Maya said, looking around at the crowd. Because the truth came out. It always does, eventually. Karen was sobbing now, great heaving sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside her chest. I'm so sorry, she managed between gasps. I'm so sorry. You tried to help me, you showed me kindness, and I tried to destroy you. Maya knelt down in front of Karen, Atlas adjusting his position to maintain contact with both women. Mrs. Whitmore, look at me. Karen raised her tear-stained face. You don't have to be perfect, Maya said gently. You don't have to carry everything alone. You have a husband who loves you, a daughter who cares about you, and access to help that could change your life. But what I did to you, what you did to me says more about your pain than your character, Maya said. Hurt people hurt people. But healing people can help people heal. Karen stared at her with wonder. How can you forgive me? After what I tried to do. Maya was quiet for a moment, her hand resting on Atlas's head. Because 18 months ago, I was where you are now. Broken, scared, convinced that I had to handle everything alone. And someone showed me that there was another way. She gestured to Atlas. This dog didn't just give me back my independence. He gave me back my faith that I deserve help, that I deserve compassion, that I deserve to take up space in the world. Karen's tears had slowed, but her eyes remained fixed on Maya's face. You deserve those things too, Maya continued. But you have to choose them. You have to choose healing over hiding, honesty over image management, connection over control. I don't know how, Karen whispered. Yes, you do, Maya said firmly. You're a social worker. You've helped other people make these choices. Now, you have to help yourself. Karen looked around at the crowd, at the cameras, at the wreckage of her carefully maintained facade. Everyone will know now. About the medication, the therapy, the panic attacks. Everyone will know I'm not perfect. Good, Chloe said, stepping forward to put her hand on her mother's shoulder. Maybe now you can stop pretending to be something. You're not, and just be who you are. Karen looked up at her daughter. And who am I? You're my mom, Chloe said simply. You're Dad's wife. You're someone who cares so much about helping people that you became a social worker. You're someone who's been hurting and trying to handle it alone. You're human. The crowd had been watching this family reunion with rapt attention, but now someone started clapping. Slowly, others joined in, until the morning air filled with applause, not for a performance, but for a moment of genuine human connection and growth. Jessica Martinez realized she had witnessed something extraordinary. This wasn't just a news story, it was a masterclass in compassion, forgiveness, and the power of choosing healing over hurt. Mrs. Whitmore, Jessica said gently, is there anything you'd like to say to our viewers? Any message you'd like to share? Karen stood slowly, supported by her daughter and steadied by Maya's presence. When she spoke, her voice was clear for the first time all morning. I want to say that I was wrong. About service dogs, about mental health, about what strength looks like. I let my fear and shame make me cruel to someone who deserved nothing but compassion. She paused, looking directly into the camera. If you're struggling with mental health issues, if you're hiding your pain because you're afraid of what people will think, please don't wait as long as I did to get help. Please don't let pride or fear or other people's expectations keep you suffering alone. She turned to Maya. And if you're someone who's gotten help, who's learned to manage your struggles and rebuild your life, thank you. Thank you for showing the rest of us that it's possible. Maya felt tears streaming down her face as she reached out to squeeze Karen's hand. We are going to be okay, she said. All of us. We are going to be okay. Atlas, perhaps sensing that his work here was done, relaxed slightly for the first time all morning. He remained alert, always working, but the crisis had passed. His handler was safe, the threat had been neutralized not through aggression but through compassion, and the morning had ended with healing instead of harm. As the crowd began to disperse and Jessica wrapped up her impromptu interview, Maya realized something profound had happened. She had started the morning as a woman trying to hide from her past, to rebuild her life in anonymity. She was ending it as someone who had publicly shared her story, stood up for herself, and helped another person find their way out of the darkness. Karen Whitmore had tried to get her service dog taken away, not knowing he was certified. But more than that, she had tried to take away Maya's dignity, her reputation, her carefully reconstructed sense of safety in the world. Instead, she had given Maya something unexpected, the chance to discover that she was stronger than she knew, more compassionate than she'd imagined, and capable of turning even her deepest wounds into tools for healing others. As Maya and Atlas walked back toward the coffee shop to finish their interrupted morning routine, Karen called out to her. Maya? She turned back. Would you mind if I asked Dr. Peterson about getting a referral for service dog training? Maya smiled, the first completely unguarded smile she'd worn in months. I think that's a wonderful idea, Mrs. Whitmore. I think Atlas would approve. And as if understanding every word, Atlas wagged his tail, just once, but enough to seal the promise that healing, like kindness, has a way of multiplying when it's